Good afternoon. Mark, I need to tell you that, I'm really thankful for SEPQ. And in 1981, I went in to close a loan on a new car. And the young lady who closed the loan that I met for the first time has now been my wife for 28 years. Now, the downside to that loan, as I tell Ann, is that I actually sold that car 3 years later, but I've been making payments ever since. No. But the reality of my situation is Ann and our 3 kids are just one of the many things that we have to be thankful for. Before getting started, I think it's appropriate to recognize the Chamber and all the work that they do for our community. We're just so fortunate to have such an engaged organization that works to promote what comes out of this community. They celebrated 100 years this year, and in this year alone, hosted 90 events to bring together our business community to help us grow and prosper and move forward. So thanks to the Chamber for hosting this great event. Thanksgiving, it has always been a very special holiday in my family. You see, I was raised in a small town called Pilot Grove, Missouri. Population 701. I grew up a loyal Cardinals fan. Probably makes about half the crowd happy today. I'm actually one of 7 kids. I have 3 older brothers, and I have 3 younger sisters. And as I have explained to my mom through the years, I am the neglected middle child. Her response to that has always been the same. When you have 7 kids, you're all neglected. The reality is there was no neglect. Even in spite of the fact that my mom and dad raised the 7 of us kids in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in the early days of my youth. Through the lens of a close-knit family in a small community, my parents cherished Thanksgiving. They just felt that it was less commercialized than the other holidays, and that we had so much to be thankful for. And some of my greatest memories come from those Thanksgiving days, the turkey, the mashed potatoes, the gravy, the green beans, the cranberries, pumpkin and pecan pie, and of course always followed by a family football game out in the backyard. Today, as my trusted associate Len Keppel will tell you, my life's not quite as simple. As I see and view the world through a global lens, part of what comes from working for a great company like Caterpillar. But in spite of global economic uncertainty, disappointment with leadership on both sides of the aisle, and some of the challenges we even face here close to home in our own region, I still collectively believe we have so much to be thankful for. Our blessings are a function of our great country and the great region that we live in, as well as the blessings that come from our family, as well as from our friends. My challenge to you today is to reflect on each of these over the holiday, to just make sure you're not taking any of it for granted. Now let me start with our country. I would ask you to not take our current standard of living for granted. I lived in South Africa during the critical years of their transition, and I witnessed firsthand people struggling for freedom and a higher standard of living. Trust me, as a society, we enjoy the highest standard of living in the world. However, we should not forget how we got there. Our lot in life is a function of our global competitiveness, which through the years has been driven by courageous leaders who for many decades made sure the United States was positioned to lead the world with great infrastructure, a business-friendly environment, active pursuit of global trade opportunities, and an education system second to none. However, as in business, if one takes things for granted, you're quickly put in your place. And today I would offer we need to raise our game. The World Economic Forum actually creates a country competitiveness code, and their figures clearly demonstrate that the U.S. is losing its competitiveness. While this may not be apparent to most of you, in a business like ours, when we're constantly exposed to the competitive forces around the world, it's actually quite obvious. We see it in the competitiveness of our tax structure, our trade policies, the quality of our infrastructure, and the decline in the world ranking of what is the ultimate source of competitiveness, and that's education. Perhaps the most concerning part is what happens if we lose that competitive edge and it's left unattended over time. The economic figures are clear. There is a direct relationship between competitiveness and standard of living. For years, through an increase in competitiveness, we raised our standard of living. If we allow the current trend of declining competitiveness to prevail, we will pass on to the next generation something they won't be thankful for, and that's a lower standard of living. Now, rest assured, I'm a glass is half full kind of guy. And when I get frustrated on this topic, I always remember Winston Churchill's quote, "You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after every other possibility has been exhausted." And while we've been exhausting a few possibilities, I absolutely believe we can restore our competitiveness. But I'd suggest that it starts with all of us right here, not taking our position in the global economy for granted. Now, I'm not talking about DC, I'm not talking about Republicans or Democrats. There are things that each of us can do as individuals. Improve the competitiveness of the businesses you work in, something we strive for each and every day at CAT. Engage in efforts to improve and reform education through school boards or as a volunteer. Engage in the political process. Write your congressman. Caterpillar employees sent over 61,000 letters to Congress on the free trade agreements, and their voice made a difference, especially related to the passage of the free trade agreements for Panama and Colombia. When we speak up, we make a difference. So from a country perspective, yes, let's give thanks over the holidays for all the many blessings that we have. But let's also take up the call to restore our country's competitiveness moving forward. Now let's move to our community. I've had the great fortune to live and work around the world, and I now proudly call Peoria home. You know, I spent a lot of time in New York, the banks, the rating agencies, the investors, and I always tell the people in the large cities, one of the challenges of Peoria is I actually have to manage my commute. It can vary as much as plus or minus 2 minutes any given day. But from my perspective, one of the things, and those of you who haven't left this community may not appreciate it, but one of the things that makes this a unique city is the sense of volunteerism. You know, people sitting right here today reach out to those in need, to those less fortunate, to the disabled, in ways that I have not seen in any other place I've lived around the world. It is a special community that we should all be very thankful for. It's also a community that's making progress. I mean, you just have to walk out and take a look. You can look across at the Riverfront Museum and the new Caterpillar Visitor Center. You can look just down the way in the new Bass Pro Shop and the new businesses that it's bringing into the community. You can look up the hilltop and an incredibly successful program by Bradley and the Renaissance and the construction that's going on. At the University of Illinois College of Medicine, Cancer Center Research Center continues construction. There'll be a ribbon cutting scheduled here next month. You head out to the airport, the General Wayne A. Downing Peoria International Airport opened up new doors, new opportunities to Peoria through its new terminal. And the Quest Charter Academy, now in its second year, is showing promise. And I recently visited Treewind to see firsthand the power of the work that Carl Cannon and the teachers are doing. So as a community, we continue to move forward. My challenge to you over this holiday season, though, is don't take our city, don't take this region for granted. In spite of all the good work that we do, we all know there's much more. An area of particular interest for me is education. A third of the kids in Peoria that enter high school do not graduate. And it's an area where I am committed to raise my game to do more. You know of other areas where we can collectively have a positive impact on those in need. So when you sit down around that Thanksgiving table and you give thanks, recommit yourself to a spirit of giving that so defines this community. Don't take it for granted. Margaret Mead once said, "Never underestimate the power of a small group of thoughtful people, committed people, to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has." Lastly, let me focus on family and friends. Please don't take them for granted. In business, we like to say there is no such thing as a free lunch, and that includes today. Now, I'm going to give you a homework assignment for the holiday. If you're anything like me, you did not get to where you are today without the great help from somebody along the way. As part of Thanksgiving, I'd really recommend that you reach out to just one of those individuals and clearly communicate to them how much you appreciate what they did. Now, I'm not talking about a casual thank you, a warm hug, a text, or a tweet. I'm talking about a heartfelt, put it down in writing, actually something that requires a stamp that you put in the mail. I took a shot at this a few years back, and it was totally by accident. And it involved the summer school teacher from my second grade school. You see, my family moved in the middle of my second grade year, and I rebelled. I actually ran away from school, to which my mom promptly took me and walked me right back there. I didn't like the teacher, and it was quite obvious the feeling was mutual. But when we got to the end of the school year, she actually recommended that they hold me back and not let me advance to the third grade. Now, my parents knew I'd struggled with the transition, and so they talked the teacher into a deal. They said, he can catch up, we'll put him in summer school, and then make sure that he's ready to move on to the third grade. Now, with the rest of my brothers and sisters enjoying their summer, I'm sure you can imagine how painful it was to get up and go to summer school. However, from the first minute I walked into that class, it all changed. The young college graduate who taught summer school that year made learning come to life for me, and I never looked back. I'd almost forgotten about her. And then a couple years ago, I was back home visiting my parents, and we were at church. And my mom pointed out a lady and she says, "Do you know who that is?" And I said, "No." And she said, "That's the sister of that young summer school teacher that taught you all those years ago." For some reason, I felt compelled to ask her for the teacher's address. And I sat down and I wrote her a letter explaining how she had changed my life and what I had achieved through the gift of education. Yeah, I was 45 years late in getting this done. But the letter that I got in response is one that I will always treasure. In it, she said, "Having just retired from teaching, on some days I wonder if I actually made an impact." She goes, "I guess now I know I did." So take some time over the holiday. Reach out to someone special and let them know you did not take what they did for you for granted. Trust me, if you do this, not only will it touch them, it will touch you. You know, there's a great song by an artist named John Mayer, and it's called "Say." And the main line of the song is, "Say what you need to say." And if you do that, you will not take those for granted that have had the biggest impact on getting you where you are today. In closing, while the points I've covered today may be a little bit on the heavy side, from my perspective, Thanksgiving is a heavy holiday. And I'm not talking about the food that's getting served. Collectively, we have so much to be thankful for. Let's not take any of it, especially our country, our community, our family and friends, for granted. You know, it's been a real honor for me to spend some time with you today. I wish you all the best for the Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you.